Did you know that the rivers of America is only 4 to 8 feet deep? Let's take a look at that. Hi everyone, it's Ked from the Mouse Scout, and today we're going to take a look at the rivers of America, the Mark Twain riverboat, the sailing ship Columbia, and Pirate's Lair on Tom Sawyer's Island. It's impossible for me to separate these attractions because they are so much a part of each other, and together they immerse you in a time and place so easily. Traveling the rivers of America is so picturesque no matter what watercraft you're on. The Mark Twain riverboat takes you on a 14-minute journey around the rivers of America. It's a 5/8 scale sternwheeler and was the first functional riverboat to be built in the U.S. for 50 years. It cost $150,000 to build and was constructed in pieces and assembled at Disneyland. The upper deck was fabricated in Burbank and the hull was built at a San Pedro shipyard, trucked overnight to the park and lifted by crane into the rivers of America. It's 28 feet high and 105 feet long. The Mark Twain is comprised of 4 pristine decks. The pilot house, known as the top deck, features the wheelhouse and the captain's quarters. The promenade deck includes a salon and a collection of vintage photos and maps. The Texas or sun deck is the perfect place to enjoy the outdoors as you float down the river. And the main deck includes the boiler and pistons that run the paddle wheel. The riverboat dates back to the opening day at Disneyland in 1955, and it was an e-ticket attraction then. Walt named the Mark Twain after the pen name of Samuel Clemens, the famed author of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Clemens was Walt's personal hero, and he was also a riverboat pilot as a young man. Because the Mark Twain travels along a hidden I-beam guide rail throughout the ride, the pilot doesn't actually maneuver the ship. Instead, the pilot serves as a lookout for other river traffic, such as the canoes and the rafts to the island, and he or she communicates his observations to the boiler engineer, who controls the speed and direction of the riverboat. Steam from the boiler is used to power the paddle wheels, and thus pushes the craft along its guideway. You travel along the rivers of America through Frontierland, New Orleans Square, and Critter Country. The Mark Twain is a tranquil way to see this part of Disneyland, and it has great vantage points to take photographs or just take in the sights. And if you're lucky, you get to take that trip around the river with the beautiful Princess Tiana from The Princess and the Frog. The sailing ship Columbia is a fully rigged 110-foot-long full-scale replica of the Columbia Rediviva, the first American ship to circumnavigate the globe. Although it has 3 masts and riggings, it rarely unfurls its sails and is powered by a compressed natural gas engine. It runs along the same track as the Mark Twain and only operates on Disneyland's busiest days or when the Mark Twain is not operating. When it is not in operation, it is docked at Fowler's Harbor behind the Harbor Galley restaurant. When Walt decided the rivers of America needed more river traffic and wanted another large ship to join the Mark Twain, he asked Joe Fowler, the former naval admiral who supervised Disneyland's construction in the early 50s, to suggest a historic sailing ship for inspiration. Fowler recommended the Columbia. After Fowler told Walt it was customary to place a silver dollar under each mast of the ship, Walt placed the silver dollars on the Columbia himself. Be sure to venture below decks to see the recreated living conditions of the 18th century, where the crew ate and slept. The Rivers of America opened with Disneyland on July 17, 1955. It's evolved a lot over the last 60 years, and back then the only way to travel it was on the Mark Twain riverboat. A year later in 1956, Disneyland added the Indian War canoes, which are now known as the Davy Crockett Explorer canoes, and Tom Sawyer Island rafts, which took the guests to the brand new Tom Sawyer Island. It wasn't until 1958 that the sailing ship Columbia was added. The riverbank around the rivers of America are all considered to be Frontierland, even though some of it is in front of New Orleans Square and Critter Country. One of my favorite places just to sit is along the riverbank here with all these benches. It's a great place just to watch the boats go by. You journey through America's waterways, the Mississippi, the Columbia, the Missouri, and the Rio Grande. Along the way, you'll pass Columbia Gorge with 5 beautiful waterfalls. You'll see lots of critters along the way. Some Native Americans and a chief who's waving from his horse. There's a shaman telling the story of how the woodpecker taught the Indian chief to make a flute. There is also a very busy beaver working to chew away the train trestle. And he's already got one done. All the waterways in Disneyland are interconnected via underground connecting tubes. It's called the Disneyland's Big River, and it's considered dark water because they actually put about 12 pounds of brown and green dye color into it. The Big River starts at the end of a pipe that pumps water from the rivers of America into Fantasyland's Storybook Land canal boats, to the moat at Sleeping Beauty Castle and Snow White's Grotto, and down to Adventureland's Jungle Cruise, then back to the rivers of America. Because the river is not chlorinated in any way, Disney has placed 3 types of fish in the rivers of America: catfish, which are bottom eaters, carp, which are the middle feeders, and mosquito eaters, which are the top feeders. And only fake piranhas. At one time in the 50s, you could drop a line into Catfish Cove on Tom Sawyer's Island and try to land one of the fish that Disney stocked in the rivers back then. But the fish kept ending up elsewhere around the park, stinking up the place, so Disney decided the fishing in the river was a bad idea. Originally, they would drain the rivers of America every 5 years in order to clean it and maintain the tracks for the boats. But in 2010, they drained the river after a 7-year stint, and they found hundreds of cell phones, pagers, walkie-talkies, a computer tower, a prosthetic leg, and half of a Davy Crockett canoe. With its most recent refurbishment and the addition of a specialized pumping and cleaning system, it will not have to be drained for another 20 years. And who knows what they'll find then. Another fun way to travel the rivers of America are the Davy Crockett Explorer canoes. There's a small dock by the Hungry Bear restaurant where 20 guests, along with 2 guides, row your way around the river. Back in 1963, cast members from Frontierland and Adventureland challenged each other to see which land's employees could paddle a canoe fastest around the river. The Disneyland canoe races became an annual tradition, with teams from all over the resort competing in the early morning hours to race their canoes around the river in pursuit of the fastest time. In 1956, Disneyland's Tom Sawyer Island debuted with structures, caves, bridges, tree houses, and Fort Wilderness to explore. The theme was taken from the pages of Mark Twain's Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and Walt actually designed this island himself. In 2007, it was rethemed and renamed Pirate's Lair on Tom Sawyer Island, adding references to Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean film series. The only way to get to this island is on the log raft stationed in front of the Haunted Mansion. These are free-floating vehicles that the driver steers by moving a tiller, and it requires a lot of skill to do that. The Tom Sawyer Island host must learn to pilot the diesel watercraft with no rail or guidance system. The rafts to Pirate's Lair generally start opening 30 minutes after the park opens, and the island closes at dusk. The island is full of caves and paths where kids can burn off a little steam. In Smuggler's Cove, there's the bone cage from Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest, which is a great photo op. You can wind up the capstan to raise the treasure chest with a little something attached. At night, Tom Sawyer's Island serves as a stage for Fantasmic, a live show with fireworks, pyrotechnics, lasers, and an amazing audio animatronic dragon. But we will cover that in another episode. Along the riverbank of Tom Sawyer Island is an old keelboat that used to be part of the Mike Fink Keelboats, an attraction that ran from 1955 through 2001. You may also notice a settler's cabin on the island that used to be the burning cabin, but it was permanently extinguished in 2000 or 2001. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our look at this fascinating area of Disneyland. It's such a beautiful place. I always love photographing it. Comment below and let me know what you think of the new additions to Rivers of America if you've seen it. And if you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps us. And consider subscribing, as we will continue to explore what makes Disney so magical. Until next time, have a wonderful week, and remember, it's all just designed for fun.